Zane Carter sat hunched on a bench that faced the playground, elbows on his knees, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn hoodie. His breath fogged in the crisp October air, and the rumble in his stomach had grown louder than the city's noise around him. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, a gas station granola bar and a half bottle of water. The last of his savings had vanished 3 days ago. The shelters were full, and his pride had long since cracked, now reduced to stealing heat from passing sunbeams and watching others live lives that once belonged to him. Children's laughter drifted in from the playground across the fence. Parents picked up their kids from the prestigious Willows Academy, most too busy on their phones to notice him. He kept his head low, not wanting to attract attention. His once pristine sneakers were scuffed and splitting at the seams. The man who used to sign off on 7-figure architectural designs now couldn't afford a hot meal. That's when he saw her. A little girl, maybe 7, in a navy blue coat and red tights, skipped away from the school gates and toward the park bench where he sat. She had 2 neat braids, and a small silver watch hung loosely on her wrist, far too elegant for someone her age. Her lunchbox was clutched in her small hands. Zane stiffened. He didn't want trouble. Maybe she was lost, maybe. "Hi," she said brightly. He looked around. No one else was nearby. Her driver, her nanny, someone. Before he could speak, she plopped herself beside him. "You look really hungry," she said matter-of-factly, swinging her legs. Zane blinked. "Excuse me." She opened her lunchbox and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in parchment and a shiny green apple. "You can take my lunch, mister. I'm not that hungry." He stared at her, stunned into silence. She extended the food toward him with both hands. "I had cereal this morning and gummy bears at recess," she added, "and I don't really like turkey anyway." Zane tried to find the words. "Listen, that's very kind of you, but you should keep that. Your mom or dad might get upset." Her face changed slightly. "My dad's in heaven. My mom's really busy running the world, but she says helping someone who's hungry is never wrong." The words hit Zane like a gentle hammer to the heart. He hesitated, then slowly reached for the sandwich. "Thank you," he said, voice low and hoarse. "That's the kindest thing anyone's done for me in a long time." She beamed. "You're welcome. You don't look scary, by the way. I told Ms. Bonnie that sometimes people just look tired, not dangerous." Zane gave a weak chuckle. "Smart girl." "I'm Lily," she said. "Lily Monroe." His breath caught. Monroe. That name was familiar, number couldn't be. He nodded slowly. "Nice to meet you, Lily. I'm Zane." "You're gonna be okay, Mr. Zane," she said with quiet confidence, sliding off the bench. Before he could reply, a sleek black town car pulled up just outside the gate. A sharply dressed woman in sunglasses stepped out, her stride brisk, her presence commanding. Lily ran toward her. "Bye," she called back with a wave. Zane watched as the woman opened the car door for Lily without saying a word, her face unreadable. But just before she stepped in, the woman turned briefly in his direction. Their eyes met, just for a second. Something flickered behind those sunglasses, something cold, something calculating. And then they were gone. Zane sat with the sandwich in hand, heart pounding, not just from hunger, but from a strange feeling he couldn't name. That little girl had just changed his day. He had no idea she would soon change his entire life. Setting, Monroe Industries headquarters, 42nd floor, downtown Chicago. Evelyn Monroe strode through the glass-walled corridor like a storm wrapped in silk. At 38, she was one of America's youngest self-made female CEOs, running the billion-dollar tech and infrastructure empire, Monroe Industries. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, phone pressed to her ear, sharp voice cutting through a conference call. "Tell Zurich we won't wait on their banking delays. Either the funds are released by Thursday or we walk." She ended the call and stepped into her corner office, sleek, modern, soulless. A panoramic view of Chicago's skyline glared behind her, cold and concrete. The walls held framed awards and magazine covers that called her the Iron Woman and the Unshakable CEO. But her mind wasn't on the markets today. It was still back at the park. That man, the one sitting beside her daughter. He wasn't dangerous. She knew how to read people. He was broken, shattered, really. But his eyes had a certain depth, the kind she hadn't seen in years. He looked like someone who had once been powerful, someone used to control and now stripped of everything. She shouldn't have cared. Evelyn Monroe didn't get distracted. And yet, she had circled back to the park an hour later just to check. He was gone. A soft knock broke her train of thought. "Ma'am," said Bonnie, her assistant, peeking in. "Lily's teacher sent today's report, and there's a note." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. A note. Bonnie stepped in, handing her a crumpled drawing. It was a child's sketch. A bench, a man with sad eyes, a little girl in red tights. Above them, a scribble in bubble letters read, "You can take my lunch, mister." Evelyn stared at it, the simplicity of it, the truth in it. "She gave her lunch away again?" she asked, voice low. Bonnie nodded. "To a stranger in the park. We ran facial scans from nearby surveillance. You might want a look." Bonnie placed a tablet in her hands. On the screen, a paused frame. Zane Carter seated on the bench, Lily offering him food. Evelyn's breath caught. Zane Carter. That name struck a bell buried deep in her memory. She tapped twice, zooming into his face. A scruffy beard covered much of his jawline, but his cheekbones, his eyes. She ran a quick search. Within seconds, his full name appeared. Zane Alexander Carter, former senior architect at Whitman Designs. Projects valued at $250 million. MIA for 8 months. She leaned back slowly in her chair, fingers steepled. So Lily had fed him. Of all the broken men in the city, it had to be a fallen genius with an unmatched portfolio and a mysterious disappearance. "You know what the media will say if they catch wind of this?" Bonnie asked cautiously. Evelyn looked away from the screen and picked up the child's drawing again. She wasn't worried about the media. She was intrigued. Meanwhile, Zane sat on the back steps of an abandoned building in South Side, finishing the sandwich Lily had given him. He had eaten slowly, almost reverently. It wasn't just the food, it was the kindness. He pulled out a small sketchpad from his backpack, half-torn, edges frayed, and flipped to a clean page. His pencil hovered for a moment. And then he started to draw. Not a building, not a city skyline. He drew her Lily, her braids, her watch, the apple in her lap. And in the corner, a set of eyes behind dark sunglasses, watching from the shadows. He didn't know her name. Not yet. But something in his gut told him he was about to find out. The next morning, Zane stood at the edge of the same park bench where Lily had offered her lunch. He didn't know why he came back. Maybe it was her smile. Maybe it was the strange safety he felt, like someone had reached across the heavy fog in his mind and simply saw him. Or maybe it was the second drawing he'd finished last night, the one of her mother standing behind the trees. That woman had looked at him with intent, not fear, purpose. And there hadn't been a wedding ring on her finger. Zane glanced at the worn watch on his wrist, dead battery, cracked glass. Useless. Still, he waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. And then, "Hi, mister." Lily's voice rang through the trees, full of sunshine. She skipped over to him, this time with a juice box in hand and a backpack slung over her shoulder. She wore the same red tights and blue coat, her silver watch clicking with every step. "You came back," she grinned, plopping down beside him like they were old friends. "I did," Zane said almost shyly. "Didn't think you'd bring me lunch twice in a row." "I didn't," she said cheekily, holding out the juice box. "Just a drink today, but I told Mommy you'd be here." Zane stiffened. "You told your mom about me." "Yup, and she told me not to talk to strangers." She gave him a long, thoughtful look. "But I told her you didn't feel like a stranger." He smiled weakly. "Smart girl." "She's watching, by the way," Lily added casually. Zane followed her gaze. Across the park, Evelyn stood by a sleek black SUV. Her dark sunglasses hid her expression, but her posture was unmistakable, composed, commanding. She was dressed in navy slacks and a white silk blouse, crisp and perfect. She nodded once. Zane raised a hand awkwardly in acknowledgement. Evelyn didn't wave back, but she turned and began walking toward them. Each step was deliberate, like a queen approaching her throne. Lily bounced off the bench. "Be nice," she whispered. "She's really smart but doesn't smile much unless I'm in trouble." Evelyn reached them and Zane stood. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice smooth and cool. He blinked. "You know my name." "I do. You were quite the rising star." Her eyes swept over his unshaven face, the worn shoes, the sketchpad sticking from his backpack. What happened? Zane hesitated. Burned out, lost my wife, lost myself. A flicker crossed her face, subtle, almost invisible. I'm sorry, she said softly, then more firmly, you're talented, and you clearly made an impression on my daughter. Zane looked down, a bit embarrassed. She did the talking, he said. I just listened. Evelyn tilted her head. That's rare. Lily grinned between them. He draws too, want to see. Before Zane could stop her, Lily opened his sketchpad. She flipped to the page with the image of her and her lunch and her mother in the background. Evelyn looked at the drawing. For a moment her guard dropped. She looked surprised, then touched. You see detail, she murmured. I used to build it, Zane replied. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Then, I'm hosting a fundraiser tomorrow night. Charity auction, quiet, intimate, you'll be there. Zane blinked. I don't exactly fit that kind of room anymore. You do now, she said. She handed him a business card. Evelyn Monroe, CEO, Monroe Industries. I want to see what you've been drawing when no one's watching. She turned to Lily. Let's go. Lily gave him a playful salute and skipped toward the SUV. Zane looked at the card in his hand, then at Evelyn's back as she walked away. The world had been silent for 8 months. Now it was speaking again. Zane stared at the glossy white business card long after Evelyn and Lily had driven away. He hadn't held something that expensive since his final blueprint proposal in his firm's glass tower. Back then his name had power. Now it was a whisper lost in coffee shops and sketchbooks. Still, Evelyn Monroe had invited him to a private fundraiser, an event he had no business attending. But the way she'd spoken, calm, firm, with eyes that didn't flinch at his worn-out shoes, something in her tone didn't ask. It instructed. And oddly, it didn't feel like pity. The Monroe estate was nestled in the hills just beyond the city, cloaked in ivy and modern steel. Glass walls overlooked acres of trimmed gardens, glowing under the warm lights of sunset. Zane adjusted the blazer he'd borrowed from a neighbor, slightly too big, and walked up the stone path. At the door, a man in a sharp black suit nodded. Mr. Carter, Ms. Monroe is expecting you. Inside, the event was all elegance, gold-rimmed glasses, laughter swirling through strings of violin, the smell of rosemary and honeyed meats. No cameras, no paparazzi, only people with deep pockets and deeper secrets. Zane walked cautiously among them, sticking to the edges, until a familiar voice caught his ear. You made it. Evelyn stood by a marble column, holding a glass of sparkling cider instead of champagne. She wore a deep green satin dress, understated and powerful. Her hair was swept back, her earrings tiny gold bars. I wasn't sure I should, Zane admitted. I wasn't sure you would, she replied. She gestured for him to follow her. Come, there's someone I want you to meet. They stepped onto a private balcony. Down below, Lily danced barefoot across the grass with another child under the fairy lights. That's my nephew, Evelyn said. She's already recruited him for her lunchtime kindness club. Zane laughed softly. She's convincing. She's something I forgot I ever was. Evelyn's voice went quiet. Kind, open, hopeful. He glanced at her. You don't seem like you've forgotten. She met his eyes then. I've just had to hide it longer. They stood in silence, the night humming softly around them. Then Evelyn reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I asked my assistant to dig up your last design, she said. The memorial project. Zane's breath caught. You found that? She nodded. I lost someone too. Years ago, not a spouse, but just as deep. Her eyes didn't break from his. Your design moved me. I want to help you finish it. Zane blinked. You mean fund it? I mean build it with you. He exhaled slowly. His hands trembled. I haven't worked with real teams in years. I don't even know if I can. I think you can, she interrupted. And more importantly, Lily already does. A violin string snapped below, making both of them glance down. Lily had tripped on her own shoelace and was now giggling on the grass, face covered in cake frosting. Zane smiled. Why me, he finally asked. You could hire anyone. Evelyn hesitated, then said softly, Because you didn't turn Lily away, and you looked at me like I wasn't made of stone." For the first time in months, Zane felt something other than grief settle in his chest. Hope, a flicker, not for the life he used to have, but for the one he hadn't imagined yet. The next morning, Zane Carter sat in the sun-drenched corner of Evelyn Monroe's office, an architectural marvel itself, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. His sketchpad rested on his lap, a half-drawn line across the page, but his attention was fixed on the framed photos behind Evelyn's desk. There was Lily grinning wildly in everyone, her messy hair, her scraped knees, her infectious smile. In one frame, a much younger Evelyn stood beside her father, a man with Lily's eyes and Evelyn's chin. "She gets her spirit from him," Evelyn said, walking in with 2 mugs of coffee. "My father, he built this company from nothing and then taught me to lead it with grace and grit. Lily barely got to know him, but she remembers how he smelled like sawdust and mint." Zane accepted the coffee. "You talk about him like he's still here." "In some ways, he is." She looked at the city through the glass. "He believed in building more than wealth. He built people." Zane studied her. There was strength in her posture, yes, but not the icy kind he had imagined when he first heard her name. This woman didn't wield power for power's sake. She carried it carefully, as though it had been handed to her by someone who earned it through sweat, not stock options. "I've reviewed your designs," she said, sitting across from him. "The memorial for your wife, the garden, the curved marble benches with etchings of poetry in the native languages of the community. It's personal." He nodded. "It was supposed to be our project. Olivia and we wanted a space for healing, for remembrance. But after she passed, the city backed out, said it was commercially viable." "That's a coward's excuse for not caring." Zane let out a breath. "It broke something in me. I stopped drawing after that." "But Lily changed that." Zane smiled faintly. "Yeah, she handed me a sandwich and asked why I looked like I hadn't smiled in 100 years. Evelyn chuckled softly. "That sounds like her." Zane flipped to a fresh page in his sketchbook. "Do you mind?" he asked. Evelyn shook her head, watching in quiet curiosity. He began sketching, bold, curved lines forming a structure with open arches, vines flowing naturally along its frame. It wasn't just a memorial now. It was something more, a sanctuary between the harsh noise of grief and the quiet hope of moving forward. A place where people could sit, remember, breathe. He paused, glanced up. Evelyn's expression had softened. "That's beautiful," she said. Would you really fund something like this?" he asked, his voice more hesitant than he meant it to be. "It's not profitable, not trendy, just needed." "I'm not looking for trendy," Evelyn said. "I'm looking for purpose, and maybe this is mine too." There was a beat of silence before she added, "Do you want to walk with me?" Zane furrowed his brow. "Where?" "To the place I go when I don't know what I'm doing." They drove together in her sleek silver sedan, surprisingly understated for someone of her wealth, to a neighborhood tucked between old churches and brick bookstores. Children rode bicycles along the cracked sidewalks, and elderly couples sat outside bakeries sipping tea. Evelyn led him to a small corner park. There, nestled behind a rusted fence, stood an old greenhouse. Its glass panels were fogged with time, and moss grew along the base. But inside, wildflowers bloomed in defiance of the world outside. "My dad brought me here the day he made me CEO," Evelyn said, walking slowly beside him. "I thought I was ready. I had degrees, I had plans, but I was terrified." Zane stood beside her at the glass, and this helped. She nodded. "He told me nothing living blooms every season, but it grows anyway." Zane's eyes lingered on a single bright orange marigold in the corner. "That's a good reminder." She turned to him, her voice lower now. "You've been through more than most, but you're still here, you're still drawing, that matters." For a long moment, they said nothing. Then she looked at him, not as a CEO, not as a woman trying to make a deal, but simply as Evelyn. "I think Lily saw something in you. I think I do too." Zane's heart beat a little faster. "You don't even know me," he whispered. "I know enough," she said. "You didn't take advantage of a hungry kid. You didn't brag or try to sell yourself, and you drew something beautiful in a world that tried to make you forget how." She reached out, gently brushing a fleck of graphite from his hand. The touch was brief, but electric. Zane looked at her, and for the first time since Olivia's death, He didn't feel like he was stealing a moment from the past. He was stepping into something new. It had been 2 weeks since Zane met Evelyn again at the greenhouse. Since then, he'd been at the Monroe Group office nearly every day, collaborating with her architects, revising blueprints, learning the tempo of a world far more polished than the one he came from. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't meeting Evelyn in a conference room or beside a sketchpad. He was standing in her foyer, wearing a pressed button-down shirt and a fresh shave, feeling as out of place as a sculptor at a black-tie gala. The Monroe estate was warm but intimidating. Hardwood floors gleamed under antique chandeliers. The walls were lined with modern art and old family portraits, evidence of old money and a long lineage. He clutched a small box of handmade chocolates from a local shop, his only idea of what to bring when invited to dinner by a woman who could probably buy Belgium. Then Lily came sprinting down the curved staircase. "Zane," she squealed, barefoot and beaming. He knelt just in time to catch her in a hug. "You came, I told Mom you would." "She didn't think I would." Lily giggled. She pretends not to care, but she changed the flowers 3 times and kept checking the pasta. From behind them, Evelyn appeared. She was barefoot too, wearing a long navy blue sweater dress that hugged her softly, her hair tied up in a loose bun, a single silver chain around her neck. Zane stared for a moment too long before catching himself. "You brought chocolate?" she asked, smiling with genuine surprise. "I didn't know what wine you'd like, but everyone likes chocolate." Evelyn took the box and nodded. "You're right, everyone does." Dinner was quiet at first. The clinking of forks, Lily talking about school and the book she was reading, Evelyn asking polite questions about Zane's time in architecture school, his favorite cities, his opinion on New York's skyline. He answered with care, sometimes guarded, sometimes loose. Evelyn noticed the pattern. "Do you always speak so carefully?" she asked him halfway through the meal. Zane set his glass down. "Only around people who intimidate me." Lily's eyes widened. "Mom, intimidating. She wears fuzzy socks with cartoon bears." Evelyn blushed. "Lily." Zane laughed. "That actually helps." The room softened after that. He told them about his life in Brooklyn, about Olivia, about the nights when he couldn't sleep, so he'd walk through the city sketching fire escapes and empty swings in the park. Evelyn listened closely, her chin resting lightly on her hand. "And why did you stop designing?" she asked. "I thought it died with her," he said, his voice low. "Until your daughter reminded me people still need beauty, even strangers." Lily beamed and grabbed another breadstick. After dinner, Evelyn offered him tea, and they moved to the living room while Lily cleaned up her toys. The room was filled with soft jazz and gentle lighting, books stacked on the shelves, a fireplace flickering gold and orange. "Thank you for coming," she said, holding her cup with both hands. "I'm glad I did," he replied. There was a pause. Then she turned slightly toward him. "May I ask something?" He nodded. "Would you have looked at me like this if I hadn't been Lily's mother, or the CEO?" Zane didn't answer right away. He looked at her, not the title, not the designer heels or the tailored blazers, just her Evelyn, quiet, brilliant, beautiful in the way strong things become soft around safe people. "I think," he said slowly, "I would have looked at you like this no matter who you were." Her eyes met his, and for once they weren't calculating or guarded. They were open. Then Lily ran back in, jumping between them. "Movie night," she chirped. "Mom said we can watch The Iron Giant." Zane chuckled. "Haven't seen that one in years." Evelyn smiled. "You'll cry, just warning you." "I don't cry at cartoons." "Challenge accepted," she teased. An hour later, Lily was asleep, curled up on the couch between them. The credits rolled quietly in the background. Evelyn looked at her daughter, then at Zane. "She trusts you," she said. Zane looked at the child nestled against his arm. "I don't know what I did to earn that." "You showed up, that's more than most people." Their eyes locked, the room stilled. No more words, just a silence that asked a quiet, powerful question neither of them dared speak out loud. Could this be something real? Zane didn't sleep that night. After leaving Evelyn's home, after gently laying Lily down on the couch and saying a quiet goodbye at the door, he walked. For hours. through quiet neighborhoods and empty intersections. His hands deep in his pockets, his head full of her laughter, her eyes, and that moment, when neither of them had spoken but everything had been said. He was halfway home when his phone buzzed. "Unknown number, you left your sketchbook in the living room. Lily says that means you have to come back." A small smile crept across his face. He knew it was Evelyn. The next morning he returned, not just for the sketchbook, but because something had shifted. And Evelyn, too, sensed it the moment she opened the door and saw him standing there again. She handed him the sketchbook, but neither moved to leave or close the door. Instead, they stood on the threshold like something was waiting. "You're up early," he said. "I didn't sleep much either," she replied. He raised an eyebrow. "Work." Her smile was soft. "Thoughts?" He nodded, same. They were quiet again until Evelyn took a breath and said, "Come upstairs. There's something I want to show you." Zane followed her to a sunlit room on the top floor of the estate. It wasn't sleek like the rest of the house. It was warm, worn in, lived in. Easels stood in one corner, a drafting table in another, and photographs lined the shelves. It was Evelyn's sanctuary where she was more than CEO, more than mother. She was simply herself. She handed him a folder. "Monroe Group is launching a new residential design wing," she said. "Smart housing, low footprint, sustainable interiors, but beautiful, graceful, for people who have never had anything beautiful." Zane opened the folder. "Sketches, concepts, a full proposal." "You want me to?" "I want you to lead it," Evelyn said. "Not as an employee, as a partner." Zane blinked. "That's a lot, I know, but I've watched you. You see things others don't. You don't just design buildings, you design around people. That's what this company needs. What I need." He stared at the papers. "And if I say yes?" "You'll have resources, a team, a say in every decision, and full creative control." He looked up at her. "Why are you really offering this to me?" She met his gaze without flinching. "Because you reminded me what it means to believe in something that's not about profit, because you gave Lily hope, because you made me feel again." Zane took a long breath. Everything in him wanted to say yes, but the echoes of doubt were still there. The voice that whispered he wasn't enough, that he was just the guy who lost everything and nearly gave up. "What if I fail?" he asked. Evelyn stepped closer. "Then you fail beside someone who won't let you stay down. That's all any of us need." They sat by the large window after that, overlooking the Monroe Gardens. Zane traced a finger along the edge of the proposal folder. "You should know," he said quietly. "I didn't grow up around people like you. I was raised by a single mom in a one-bedroom apartment. I don't speak the same language sometimes." Evelyn's lips curled into a smile. "I grew up with a nanny more than a mother, and my father once told me feelings were distractions. I think we both speak the same language, just from different dialects." He laughed softly. "Fair enough." Then he turned to her. "You're really offering me all this?" "I'm not just offering you a job, Zane," she said. "I'm offering you a future, one that includes space for who you are." Zane closed the folder and looked out the window, the morning light warming his face. "Then I accept." Later that evening, after signing the initial papers and shaking hands with a stunned project manager, Zane stepped out onto the Monroe balcony, overlooking the city skyline. Evelyn joined him, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "To new beginnings," she said. "To second chances," he replied. They clinked glasses and sipped. Then Evelyn looked over at him. "There's one condition I forgot to mention." Zane raised an eyebrow. "There's always a catch. You have to let Lily design your office door sign." He laughed. "Deal." She looked at him, a twinkle in her eye. "You really have no idea how much you've already changed everything, do you?" "No," he said honestly, "but I'm starting to feel it." The wind shifted, the city lights flickered, and between them something unseen settled into place, not a contract, not a strategy, but a bond neither had expected. Something real. It didn't take long for the world to notice. By the end of the week, Zane was already making quiet waves inside the Monroe headquarters. A fresh face with a rough edge, an outsider walking into boardrooms with rolled-up sleeves and unfiltered ideas. The other executives, most of whom had Ivy League degrees and trust fund surnames, didn't quite know what to make of him. But they did notice one thing. Evelyn Monroe watched him differently. Not like an employee, not like a project, but like someone she trusted instinctively, like someone who mattered. Whispers started first, harmless ones at the office cafe, behind folders in the elevator. Isn't that the guy from that shelter project Evelyn donated to last year? He's not even from the design department. He just appeared. Think there. Speculation turned to murmurs. Murmurs turned to gossip. And on a Tuesday morning, it became headlines. Monroe CEO's mystery man, who is he? From street sketches to boardrooms, the stranger in Evelyn Monroe's circle. The tabloids had a field day with it. A grainy photo of Evelyn and Zane at the company garden, another of him escorting Lily from the school gate. No confirmation, just juicy implications. Evelyn's PR team was quick to step in. Statements were prepared, backgrounds vetted. Zane was called in for a media consultation, a polite term for what felt like a mini interrogation. Are you involved with Ms. Monroe personally? No. Are you living with her? No. Have you ever been romantically linked? No. But the truth wasn't that simple. That evening, Evelyn called Zane into her private office. He could tell she was annoyed, not by him, but by the circus now surrounding their every interaction. They're saying I hired my lover as a partner in a billion-dollar initiative, she muttered, tossing the latest article across the table. Zane read the headline, From Couch to CEO's Lap, Monroe's Reckless Move. Creative journalism, he muttered, deadpan. Evelyn gave a weak chuckle. The board wants me to make a statement, clarify boundaries, reaffirm protocol, basically make you look like a fluke. Should I step back? He asked quietly. Her head shot up. No, absolutely not. Because I don't want to cost you anything. You're not costing me anything, Zane, she said. You're the first real thing I've let into this empire in years. They sat in silence for a moment before Zane said, Then let's get ahead of the story. She raised an eyebrow. Let them talk, he said. Let them wonder. But if we show them we're not hiding, they'll lose interest. Transparency wins faster than denial. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. You were never just a stranger, were you? She said. You were always meant to walk into my world. He shrugged. Maybe I was just the guy who shared lunch with the wrong kid on the right day. She smiled. Then I owe Lily more than I thought. The next morning, Evelyn and Zane walked side by side into the Monroe Group's press room, where a modest number of reporters were already waiting. They looked crisp, calm, intentional. Evelyn stepped up to the mic. I'd like to introduce you to Zane Carter, my newest partner in the design and innovation department. We met under unconventional circumstances, but his work has already shifted how we think about community spaces. His influence is not the result of favoritism, but of brilliance. Zane stepped up next, clearing his throat. I come from nothing. I've failed more times than I can count. But Ms. Monroe saw value in me that no one else did. Not because she needed to, but because she chose to. One reporter raised a hand. Are the rumors of a personal relationship true? Zane looked to Evelyn, who gave him the smallest nod. Not yet, he said, smiling, but I hope one day they will be. The room buzzed, flashes popped, reporters scribbled like mad. But Evelyn simply smiled and took his hand. And just like that, they owned the story. The headlines had slowed. The board had calmed. And Evelyn, after weeks of firefighting optics, finally breathed. It was a Saturday when Lily tugged on Zane's hand and whispered, "Wanna see my secret?" Zane looked down at her with a grin. What kind of secret? The kind even Mommy doesn't know about, Lily said, her voice a hush of giggles. Evelyn raised an eyebrow from across the living room, sipping coffee. If you break something, I'm blaming both of you. Lily grabbed Zane's fingers. Come on, and no peeking till we get there. He humored her, closing his eyes as she led him through the long hallways of the Monroe estate. Her small hand tugged him with urgency, until they stopped near an old wooden door at the edge of the greenhouse. Open your eyes. Zane blinked. Inside was a world no one would have expected. An overgrown nook of wildflowers, child-painted rocks, tiny wooden benches, and a mural of stars and dragons on one wall. "This is your secret garden?" he asked, wonder in his voice. Lily beamed. "I made it after Daddy went away. I talked to him here." Zane's heart clenched. He looked at the tiny painted handprints on the garden wall and the child-scrawled letters that spelled Daddy, I miss you. "He used to sit here with me," Lily whispered. "Mommy doesn't come in here anymore. She says it makes her sad." Zane crouched beside her. "That's okay. Sometimes places remember people, but I think your daddy would be really proud of this one." Lily tilted her head. "Do you think he'd like you?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know," Zane answered honestly, "but I'd like to think so." She nodded solemnly. "He liked people who made Mommy laugh, and you do that." Zane smiled. "Well, then maybe I'm doing okay." Later that evening, Evelyn found them still in the garden, Lily asleep with her head in Zane's lap, surrounded by wind chimes and fairy lights. She stood at the doorway for a long moment, arms crossed, watching. "I didn't know she still came here," she said softly, her voice nearly drowned out by the wind. "She said she talks to her dad here," Zane replied, brushing a leaf from Lily's curls. "I haven't been inside this room in 3 years," Evelyn admitted. "I couldn't bear it, but she kept it alive." Zane looked up at her. She didn't just keep it alive, she made it magic. Evelyn slowly walked in, her heels crunching the gravel. She sat beside him, not speaking for a while. "I thought I was protecting her by avoiding it, by locking the grief in a room and never going back." She ran her fingers over the wall. "But she needed this place, more than I realized." Zane reached over, his fingers gently grazing hers. "You built her a palace, but she built herself a sanctuary." She leaned her head against his shoulder, eyes misty. "I didn't think I had space in my heart for anyone new," she whispered. "But you've made yourself at home in all the places I boarded up." Zane turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "That's because I'm not trying to replace anything, just planting something new." For a moment the wind stilled. She kissed him, softly, quietly, without fear. And the secret garden, built from grief, watered by love, welcomed its newest memory. 6 months later, Zane walked into the Monroe Foundation gala in a tailored suit and a nervous heartbeat. He wasn't used to suits, or red carpets, or flashing cameras. But tonight he wasn't just the man who shared his lunch. He was on the arm of Evelyn Monroe, the CEO who had once hidden behind boardrooms and impenetrable walls, now smiling like a woman in bloom. Beside them, Lily twirled in a pale blue dress. "I look like Cinderella," she exclaimed, spinning until her curls bounced. "You look better than Cinderella," Zane said, offering her a pinky promise. Evelyn smirked. "Flattery will get you everywhere." They walked through the crowd together, and Zane felt dozens of curious eyes. Whispers, recognition. Someone from Evelyn's executive team approached with a clipboard. "Ma'am, press is requesting a photo of you three for the official page." Evelyn looked at Zane, who hesitated. "Up for it?" she asked gently. He looked at her, at Lily, who was now practicing curtsies, at the woman who had rebuilt her world piece by piece, and let him in. "I think I can handle a photo," he said. They posed in front of a glowing backdrop, Evelyn standing tall, Lily clutching Zane's hand in the center. The photographer adjusted his lens. "Say cheese." Lily yelled, "Say sandwich," instead grinning. Click. Flash. That moment would go viral by morning. The CEO, the stranger, and the girl with the sandwich. Back at home, when the gala lights had faded and Lily was tucked into bed, Zane stepped out onto the terrace with Evelyn. City lights stretched out below them, and the moon bathed the skyline in silver. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, quiet. "I used to think being alone made me strong," she said. "Like needing someone meant I was failing." Zane stepped closer. "Needing someone doesn't make you weak, Evelyn. It makes you human." She smiled faintly. "You taught me that, or maybe reminded me." Zane reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. She raised an eyebrow. "Another sandwich." He opened it to reveal a tiny charm, a silver sandwich locket on a chain. "Lily helped me pick it," he said. "She said it's for the guy who shared his lunch and the woman who gave him a second chance." Evelyn touched the charm, blinking back emotion. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe," Zane said, "but I'm also yours." She didn't reply, she just kissed him. And in that quiet, no longer lonely night, Evelyn Monroe finally knew. Strength wasn't in solitude. It was in sharing, in risking, in letting someone see the cracks and fill them with warmth.